Yeah, so my name is. Oh, do-
Try again.
well,
That's what. How's that?
Yes. Rebound.
Yep.
Great, we'll start again. My name is Tracy Shell and I'm the president and CEO of Vermont Land Trust.
And I'm Alan Carnatz. I do farm projects, farm conservation projects in the Champlain Valley and been doing that for a few decades now.
Al and I have both worked at Vermont Land Trust. Al's a couple years ahead of me at
Yeah,
3 decades actually.
3 decades.
It's not
All
a
right,
couple.
fine.
And I worked at Vermont Land Trust for 27 years, but just about a year and a half as in the role. And then now I started my career running around the Northeast Kingdom, conserving land with farmers and foresters and communities, and started working in statewide roles, overseeing our conservation programs and then our conservation and stewardship programs around 2014. And so now I'm in this role. So it's been a really fun trajectory for me. I love Vermont Land Trust, feel passionate about the work we do and the people we serve, and really enjoying the role I play now.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Al and I, we just have a slide deck. We will definitely be mindful of the clock to get you guys downstairs and really want you to stop us as we go so that, we're really answering your questions and tailoring this to what you're looking to understand about the work Vermont Land Trust does. This is our sort of purpose statement that, we look to help people protect, care for, and connect to the home that we share, which is Vermont. And just some background on the Land Trust. We're getting close to our 50th anniversary. We were founded in 1977. And actually our founder, Rick Carbon, who was the first executive director of the Land Trust, he and a group of people started the organization really with a vision of sort of a three-legged stool of what a community needs. So focused on land and our working landscape, but also housing and economic development, thinking that those three initiatives really make a community whole and the kind of place we want. So since we were founded, we've conserved quite a bit of land. We're one of the more active land trusts in the whole country. Conserved at this point 11% of Vermont. Some of that's through acquisition of land by the state, towns, but a lot of it through the use of a tool called the conservation easement, which we'll talk about. We passed over 1,000 farms. Actually, our 1,000th farm was in Stowe. The Ricketson farm was the 1,000th farm. I can't say 1,000th, but farm. And now we've passed that, and also conserved about 450,000 acres of forest land, and steward probably one of the largest conservation easement portfolios in the country in terms of numbers, 2,300 conservation easements. That's 2,300 different landowners' properties. And we also own land. We own 44 properties. And some of those, we own them, and we'll talk about this later, but for short periods of time to help bridge ownership. And some we commit to for the long term. Some we accept as gifts from landowners who are looking for a home, the next home for their land, and conservation is really important to them. And so we help them find that next buyer. And in gifting the land to us, also help us to fund more conservation. And then some lands we do own and are really committed to because of where they are and the role we can play in a community. So Bluffside Farm in Newport is an example. The King Farm in Woodstock is another example. The Brewster Uplands property in Jeffersonville is another example of one of those kind of really invested flagship properties that we own. We have membership of over 3,000 members, a lot of Vermonters, and then folks from kind of all over New England and really all over the country. We have 47 employees these days and an operating budget over $7 million. We have always been very intentional about spreading our staff out and really having our staff embedded in the communities that they serve. So we have 5 offices around the state, but we also have, even pre-COVID, had quite a few people who work out of their homes because they are located in a spot where one of our regional offices wasn't, but where people are and land is that we want to serve. So like Bennington is an example. We've had a staff person in Bennington for many, many years, sort of a solo office.
Before you move off this slide,
Yeah.
any questions from committee members?
Yeah, you can see this map here. Obviously, you can focus in on some of those green areas. This is obviously the National Forest up in the Northeast Kingdom, where's the Champion Land, which is one of our biggest, probably our biggest deal ever. But then all the other green pieces, it's an indication of where our tillable land is in Vermont. In that you can see Addison County, you can see Franklin County. There's some major blocks of protected land, especially Shoreham, the South Lake. We were talking about South Lake earlier. So that this is, to me, I'm pointing here up in Orleans County. Same way, Meadowy Valley. We're spread around, like you said, Tracy, we want to be geographically strategic and try to conserve land around the state. But for the farmland piece, it's kind of an indication of where the best farmland is.
Tracy, can you just clarify the 11% figure? That's Vermont Land Trust?
Yes.
Okay.
That doesn't include
Doesn't include any of the other.
Right. So, Act 59, recent, which was passed a couple of years, 30 by 30, the first phase of the inventory phase tallied 27% of the state protected. And so 11% of that is been through the direct action of Vermont Land Trust and the conservation easement that we hold.
Thank you. Representative Lipsky, did you have a hand up?
I did, thank you. Obviously, I've served and collaborated with you, Alan, on a few projects, but my question has to do with the 450,000 acres of forest land. Also a strong advocate for active management on conserved land. And want to know if you have a policy or what percentage of that 450,000 acres of forest land allows for active management or encourages management plans.
So all of our conservation easements support active management of land. Within those conservation easements, there are areas that, if they're a unique natural community or a stream buffer, for example, have more restrictive language around either wintertime only harvesting or harvesting that's most protective of those natural communities. Occasionally there's no cut areas, but our conservation easements and as an organization, we're Working Lands Land Trust. So that is the orientation of all the forest land that we've protected.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's a clear distinction there too, because obviously there's other organizations, other nonprofits. Landowner comes to me and says, I don't want anything to happen on this land. I want it to be like a no-touch property. And my quick answer, it's a short conversation, because that's not what we're about. There may be other organizations that we could steer them to.
Right.
But we're not going to do, like you say, in certain highly sensitive ecological areas, stream banks, those kinds of things, and maybe no touch, but not the overall property is still going to have a forest management plan.
And one more stat around forest land. About a quarter of the forest land that Vermont Land Trust has protected has been done through farmland conservation, through working with farmers, because they are stewards of quite a bit of forest land in Vermont. We're not Iowa. We look really different. Our farmland ownerships look really different. And so many of our farmland conservation projects have a component of forest land protection as part of that, and working lands.
Thank you, Tracy.
Representative O'Brien.
Yeah.
So I don't know how unusual it is, but could you talk about the farm in Tunbridge, that the Chapman Farm, Merle Howe Farm that you, so that you were sort of a bridge in that case to potential ownership by a sort of cooperative, right?
Yeah, and we'll talk about this more when we get into the farmland access strategies, but yeah, so we have always owned land as an organization, but we've gotten a lot more intentional in recent years as to the why. And so serving as a bridge owner for farmland access goals has become a growing part of what we do. And many of those opportunities are helping a new operator, family, individual owner to step into their first farm ownership and develop a business there. But we have been involved in the last couple of years in two, and one is transferring today, two opportunities to also support alternative ownership models. So real estate's hard, real estate's expensive, agriculture is really hard, capital intensive. And there are folks thinking about new and different ways to lower the barriers to entry for farm ownership. And one of those is thinking about collective ownership models. And so down in Representative O'Brien's Tunbridge, yeah. The Chapman Farm, it was a dairy farm. We had actually helped conserve it, helped a new dairy business start there. Unfortunately, they decided to stop farming and to sell the property. And we were approached by a group that wanted to create a collective ownership model that was supportive, incubating some farm operations, but also really connecting with the community in a lot of different ways. And so we agreed to purchase the farm and hold it while that group, which is called the White River Land Collaborative, came together. And we still own it right now, actually, and are supporting sort of the development of their plan to eventually acquire the land. Another example is Bread and Butter Farm up in South Burlington, which is now called the AgriHood Collective. They created a nonprofit, and we're actually transferring the farm to
Yes,
them today.
closing this afternoon, right
Yeah,
now.
which is also really exciting because that was a big lift. City of South Burlington was very involved, both like from a support standpoint, but also financially. And their goal is a collective ownership that's really supportive of the employees. Thinking about housing for their employees is actually a really important piece of what they're doing, carving out areas for that and being supportive of sort of this collective ownership.
If I may follow up one, because Vice Chair Representative Heather Supernant is not here. This is a goal of ours, but she's a leader in this. Is access for new farmers, young farmers that don't have the capital for buying real infrastructure farms. That's a high priority with us for food production and entry level for young new farmers. And sounds like you can play an important role. And as you know, rural Vermont are very active in this initiative as well.
Yeah.
Just want to say that.
Yeah,
is
no, it's great.
valuable.
Yeah.
Not speaking for the committee, but some of us on the committee.
I think there's a slide that speaks to that.
Yeah, and we're gonna run through a few examples too, that kind
Yeah.
of demonstrate the different ways that we use conservation to help expand access to agricultural land. But this slide is, just really again noting that a big part of what Vermont Land Trust does is to protect land, but we're also very actively involved in helping to support the care of land through education, technical assistance, incentives, education and events, and also connecting to land. So not everyone is going to own a farm, not everyone is going to own land, but how can our work benefit all Vermonters? Whether that's through expanding, ownership of municipal land or trail access, or even just events and education. Gotten really involved in some of the properties we own are very tightly connected with the local school systems and thinking about how to use our land resource to benefit children's and young adults' education. And that's been a really exciting thing that we've been doing in Newport, Jeffersonville, and Woodstock.
Yeah, we've done a lot of town forest projects
Mhm.
similar.
Yeah, you don't have recreation up on there, and that's a big piece of your land in Newport.
Yeah, that's true.
People are
Yeah,
out there every day working out
yeah.
and cross country skiing or snowshoeing or walking it back and up, and they're there all summer long in the bike path.
Yeah.
And it's really been a phenomenal asset. The only problem with it is the longest growing season in Orleans County. And I ought to have soybeans down here, but I don't.
Well, let's keep talking.
That's the banana belt of Orleans
Yes,
County,
yes,
right there, because it's right on the lake.
It's the only one, yeah. Oak trees.
All right.
Yeah, there's oaks all across Club.
Yeah.
Representative O'Brien.
So did I hear you hold easements for municipal lands?
Yeah, we help create quite a few town forests across the state and hold a conservation easement that the land transfers to the town. And, you know, the conservation easement in that case is very focused on protecting public access. I'm thinking about as pressures on towns can sometimes come to bear and select boards change, sort of protecting the public investment in that asset. And then also the management planning and sort of thinking through how to manage that land to best support as many people in town as possible. But it's been a longstanding
Yeah,
part
we
of
just
our
finished
work.
one in Moncton, like 400+ acres.
Yeah.
Really nice town. A. Johnson Lumber was ready to divest. And we worked with them. The town was eager to acquire it. There'll still be some forest management on that for sure.
And this is just a highlight, we handed out our annual report, but just a highlight of just our past year, which, you know, we conserved about almost 9,000 acres, quite a bit of forest land, but also a significant amount of farmland. And we protect generally around 20 to 25 farms a year at the pace that we have right now with the funding that we have. The demand is higher than that. But the combination of the state's investment in the Vermont Housing Conservation Board and the federal investment through USDA, NRCS in the ACEP-AL program, we conserve about 20 to 25 farms a year. Of those, 7 were new farm families buying land. Others were, existing farm operations that were looking to sell a conservation easement in order to take that equity they didn't want to use, the development rights, and transfer that into, sometimes it's buying additional land, sometimes it's investing in infrastructure. We see people use it to transition to organic. You know, there's a lot of different ways people use the proceeds from selling a conservation easement and conserving their land. And as part of that work, we're also protecting a lot of water frontage, rivers, streams, wetlands. And something that we've gotten a lot more invested in recent years is not just setting aside those stream buffers and wetlands from development, but actively partnering with the landowner and with local groups. Some of it we're doing ourselves. We have a couple of AmeriCorps members who engage in this, is actually actively planting trees to establish buffers. So not just to remove the development or the agricultural use in those areas, but actually get them restored and acting, filtering water faster. So that's been actually really fun addition and actually really supportive of water quality. Also, a lot of food is grown, again, on the lands we own. We are involved in quite a bit of community garden work. Pine Island is another place for that we have a large community garden for New Americans, Pine Island property in Colchester. And events is a big part of how we reach people as well.
Yeah, if you want to just hold that slide, I'm
Yeah.
just going to say, this is literally
Oh, yeah. There you go.
our cover story
Yeah.
here with the Lucases. It's just one, we mentioned 7 farm families helped buy that land. The Lucas is one that I was particularly proud of and involved in that you've got the report there, but they had rented this dairy farm in Orwell near the lake for almost 7 years, and they knew they could never really buy it. They really wanted to own it, but they couldn't make investments on it because they were just renters. You know, every time they would think about improving the barn or doing some other manure management improvements, they were kind of cut off. But our easement money through the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, which is our mainstay, as Tracy mentioned, there's some USDA Farm Bill money that helps match that. But the Lucases, they had farmed in Starksboro for a while. They bounced around on a couple of different farms. But now they own this farm through the conservation of their almost 400 acres. So anyway, I'll just point that out. You can read more about it if we have time.
That farm is adjacent to the notorious Slate Valley where the multicolored slate
Comes from,
roofing.
yep.
It's one of the
Yeah.
few
Mhm.
geologic phenomenon. And that's an incredible example of.
I can't tell you how many times that barn has been photographed.
Well, no,
It's sort of like Vermont life all over.
That roof is spectacular.
Yeah.
but it is part of the conserved property now.
Yeah, I realize that.
Yeah, that's great.
Anyway,
Yeah, so I'll pass this to you.
you can talk about
Okay.
the Albany property.
Yeah, so just wanted to set up, we talked a little bit about how much farmland we've protected. Also we've helped over 100 transfers. I'm gonna walk through a number of some of our examples protected, but this, just to tell a quick story, Heartwood Farm, it's now owned by Andy Payanessa and his partner Marina Carlton, and they were able to purchase this farm in South Albany. They raise organic vegetables, they also sugar, and they had been leasing parts of this farm as well as some neighboring farms from the longtime owners, the Whitcombs, and their ability to purchase the farm was really directly linked to the sale of a conservation easement that made it affordable. And they also lease a portion of the farm to another conserved farm, Sweet Rowan Farm, Paul Lisi, who's a dairy producer. So that sort of, the conservation of this property transfer also is benefiting more than one farm.
Yeah, it's definitely one of our priorities, try to link these folks up with good farmland, for sure. Yep.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we've got a couple more I can speak to. But, my work is literally, I work in the Champlain Valley. And here's what we're seeing, and this probably doesn't need to be explained to you. You sound all very well versed in the agricultural scene, but, things like increasing farmland values, the declining dairy sector, but the consolidation of the dairy sector, as you well know, is very, very much alive. Farms, like I said, getting bigger, and there's some smaller organics, but our aging population of farmers, well into their 60s, many of them. And also we get involved with trying to figure out when we do an easement, should we allow some other farm labor housing to come into the property? Our easements often allow additional farm labor housing, not to be subdivided off, but can allow some other farm labor housing to go on the property. And just that increasing development pressure that we're seeing, and climate change impacts, we're trying to, this is actually Hannah Sessions and Blue Ledge, where we actually knew that this was flooding all the time on this, and this was Otter Creek that flows in here. And so some of this land is taken out of agriculture. They would hay it maybe to get some reed canary grass hay or some marginal hay. But now we realize this is a flood sink, be talking more and more about this, but we need these flood sinks. So the town of Middlebury, 10 miles up the road, doesn't flood. So this is what we're doing more increasingly on properties like Hannah Sessions.
So can you speak a little more to that? Was this property that the owner came to you and said, can you help us by providing an easement that will allow for it to be a sink?
Well, no, it's a good question, because we had previously conserved this farm almost 5-10 years ago. And we came in through VHCB and other funding sources to put additional restrictions. And we're doing that more and more as we see climate change. There's good justification for going back to some of these farms to say, oh, we didn't do this 10 years ago. We didn't set aside this land, but we're going back and putting those kinds of easements on properties.
It really speaks to just, the learning that we've all had around water quality and land management. And when we were conserving farms 20 years ago, we weren't thinking about stream buffers. We weren't thinking about floodplains in the same way we are now. And so it's always willing seller, but we do actively look at the lands we've already protected for opportunities to enhance water quality. And those are often a win-win for the landowner, because we're able to bring additional funds to buy more restrictions. They have to want to do it, and many do, because I think farmers are seeing, that leaving land at, buffering streams, letting the river go where it's going to go, because it's going to go there anyway. And being able to take advantage of incentive programs is benefiting all of us. So it's an active part of our work, is sort of looking back at the conserved landscape and how can we improve it, how can we help those landowners to be the best managers they can be, and what financial incentives can be
Yep.
great.
Yeah.
Representative Nelson?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Duffy. So in this case, were you able to like partner up some WRP, Wetland Reserve Protection money? Program money and do ditch plugging and whatnot and.
Yeah, we didn't go as far as well, we did in some. I mean, what you're referring to is a federal program,
Yeah.
which is the WR Wetland Reserve Program. And their restriction is much more restrictive in that they will go in and plug ditches, and we've done that on a number of occasions.
And when, you know, of course, the great thing about agricultural lands in the floodplains, it isn't great for me when Benny Larissa's farm loses 50 acres or 60 acres of corn, but that's where the water needs to go.
Exactly.
So you don't want houses down there, we don't want trailers down there, we don't want gravel pits. It farmland, it floods.
Yep.
The water goes away. Hopefully it doesn't flood again this year.
And as Tracy said, we're trying to bring in a whole complement of different programs, like the Wetland Reserve Program. Or there's a one ag agency you'll probably hear about, it's called CREP, and they do
Yeah.
buffer pieces, so, yeah.
So that's where I was wondering if you brought additional monies in, if
Yep.
they agreed to quit trying to get Reed's canary grass off it in August every third year.
Exactly.
Right, exactly. It's really looking at where are those places that are the least productive. And often farmers say like, yeah, I'm not actually using this enough to make it worth it. And if I can be paid to additionally restrict it, it's a win-win.
Yep.
Yeah. Mhm.
Representative Fair?
Sure, thank you. What kind of dollar values are we, is that a slide coming up, but if
Some of these properties,
Yeah,
like
so
how
like
much were they paid?
specifically for in this case,
Yeah.
what are they getting paid per acre to do those easements?
You know, I don't have that number off,
Yeah.
we can get that
We
to
can
you,
follow
but
up,
it's
yeah.
maybe $100,000, maybe, it's in those kinds of easements. Whereas the one I mentioned here on their whole property, 400 acres, it was about $600,000. So,
1,500 an acre.
yeah,
Yeah.
1,500, 2,000 an acre, sometimes more. I'm dealing with one in Milton right now. Actually, you may know this farm. I think I could talk about it. I try to keep it confidential early on, but it's going to be.
We are live.
We are on YouTube.
Yeah, well,
Right?
it's fine. It's going to be HCB for funding, so but the Richards Dairy Farm, you know that property. It's a beautiful property.
Yeah.
And that's appraising way over, that 1,500. I mean, it's in Milton. It's not in Shoreham, and this happens to be in Leicester. Anyway,
Yeah, there's an appraisal process that documents, and it's really looking at the difference between sort of what a property would sell for unrestricted versus restricted to development. And it is
yes,
it
it's very
matters how
regional.
much open tillable land there is, how much road frontage, where geographically it is, but tends to track in the
Yeah.
40 to 60% of the fair market value.
Yeah, but when we go into Stowe or Milton or other areas or Charlotte, those numbers jump
Mhm.
significantly.
Yeah, and we're seeing, I mean, we've also just seen, the escalation of real estate values across the state in all sectors that farmland is
Yeah.
feeling that for sure.
I mean, I think in the Richards case, it's hopefully a generational transfer. We talk about shifting farms, but a lot of my work is also being able to pass it on to the next generation. Maybe not a brand new farm owner or buyer, but to the next generation, and that makes it possible too. So,
So, yeah, those are just some stats.
yes, this is another transfer. The old road farm right on Route 100 in Granville was sort of not totally abandoned, but they brought this farm back to life through our conservation work. But yeah, if you could see 80 conserved farms sold in the last 5 years. Actually, we're seeing more conserved farms selling these days than unconserved farms. They're a better value for the farmer. And when we do these appraisals, the appraisers are saying, well, it's hard for me to find a sale of a farm that's not conserved. These days, there's more sales of conserved farms.
Stopped by there in October
Oh, you
this
did?
year, yeah, when we were doing a forestry tour up in the national forest, but
Yep.
there's a lot of great farmland in that.
There really
Yeah,
is. There's another one coming up, we'll finish up on. But
Yeah, that was great. And
You know,
we're
excited are you, Alan?
I don't get passionate about this, yeah. I'm just trying to keep you on time.
No, I think they were on our committee, I think last year.
I think they were, exactly. Yes, John.
Memory, John.
Yeah, and then.
Oh, yeah,
Mm,
we miss him.
Carl,
He's just a good guy. All right,
All right, moving, yeah, so
Sure.
should we move? I mean,
Yeah, I
the one
think
other
we're
thing is
fine.
we do have about $15 million in debt capital that we revolve and use to purchase farms, be the short-term owner. One of the learning we had was we used to try to, you know, if we're gonna own it, we're gonna own it for the least amount of time possible. Just enough time to get the conservation dollars, you know, go through the application process and then flip it, get it to the new owners. And what we discovered is that's not really supportive of new farm operations. That for some people, that's great. For others, having more time with less pressure of ownership to really develop their business, try some things out, partner up with some of the farm viability, technical service providers, make some investments in the land that we could make through grant funds, actually is more likely to end up with a successful farm operation. And so by putting together this capital fund, we're able to afford to own the farm longer, up to 5 years in some cases, to really give a longer path to ownership. And so right now we're kind of cycling through owning 10 to 15 farms at a time. And some are going out of our ownership and then some are coming in our ownership, and they're all kind of at different paces. And it's been a growing piece of
Yeah.
our work.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah, I guess the point being, we're willing to take that risk of going into an ownership, being in the chain of title. So yeah, here's a classic one. I don't have a whole lot to say, but this property of the Leach family, you're familiar? Yeah, it's
Meadowy.
representative, it's a stellar example of our work down there in Meadowy.
Do they make the milk for Plymouth cheese?
You know, I don't
think so.
think
know.
so. Yeah, I don't know.
Somebody down there.
Okay, I'll find out.
Yeah,
Find
yeah.
out. Yeah.
But again, it's at the bottom piece, 860 acres, supported by VHB and NRCS with matching grant funds coming from NRCS for USDA.
A bunch of that's timber too, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep. And then I think the next slide
Yep.
is one that we can speak to where we bought this property
Yeah.
in Waitsfield. The Freeze, and most people don't think of Waitsfield, Warren as a big farming region, but the Freeze are the big dairy farm in the Mad River Valley, and they're constantly looking for land. And so this was coming up on the market. We ended up actually stepping in to buy it because time was of the essence in most real estate deals. People can't maybe wait for 2 years. My typical process is landowner calls me today. I said, well, how about 2027? You know, it's going to be a couple of years before. So, but if we can step in, purchase a property within 6 months, let's say, and then hold it, put our easements on it. In this case, we have a huge riparian protection along the Mad River. It was a 70-acre piece. And it also has those buffers that we talked about. And this was a combination funded by USDA, VHCB, and Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, because they will provide some of the riparian protection money.
Yeah, river corridor.
Yeah, the river corridor.
And a permanent trail with the.
Yeah, we had public
path.
access on this, exactly.
This property sort of had it all, but us owning it allowed us to kind of stack these different initiatives and funding sources together
Yes.
and like time it all together so that when it transferred, this was all in place.
Yep. And then here's another example of the Doyle family. I think she might have come to speak to one of the committees over the last couple of years, but they were farming in really a hard scrabble hill farm up in Bakersfield, Franklin County. And they've been looking around for land, and we sort of knew of this other property in Fletcher. And he said, this is coming up on the market, but before it comes up on the market, we might want to make a play, or you might want to make a play on it. And we had it appraised. We worked with the owner. It was a trust. It's called the King Family Trust. And they were willing to wait out that couple-year process. So in this case, we didn't step in to get in the chain of title, but they were willing to get the appraisal done and get into the queue, into the line. And then the Doyles were able to buy it. They have a really nice diversified farm operation on there, along with, well, you can see chicken, pork, sugar bush, and there's a main brook that runs through the farm that also has riparian protection. We were out planting trees a couple of years ago. Anyway, that's the little story on Doyle. And I think we've got,
Brian had a question on the,
oh, sure,
before you go on, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I just.
This is our final slide, but go
Okay,
ahead.
no, go ahead, finish up.
Okay, well, yeah, so we're just gonna wrap up, we really tailored what we're talking about today around our farmland conservation work, but we've touched on some of the forest land conservation work we've done, and so thought we'd just also talk about some of the ways we're thinking about our work and adding things to our work for climate resilience. And, forest land conservation, holding the ability to hold water higher in watersheds, have intact forest, is an important strategy. Also, we already talked about the fact that we're going back to our conserved lands and looking at what we call overlays. So thinking about new restrictions on those that are water quality and flood resilience focused. Also, wetland and ecological restoration and the role that wetlands play in just being those sponges that we increasingly are realizing we really need as water is just coming down on us in really different ways and affecting our built environment. Also thinking about soil health, we've been involved in a really interesting grant-funded program that we're partnering with UVM and Extension and with a private business that focuses on sort of metrics to work with a set of farm owners to transition their management to improve soil health and measure the impacts of that and incentivize that. So make payments while they're doing this transition to some pasture based, just to pilot sort of what's possible and be, because we have this connection with so many landowners, we often are looked to as an important partner to help bridge, new programs to conserve landowners. And think of that as just an important service that we can bring to the conserved land. So, we really think about, we've reserved and participated in reserving over 11% of the state from development. Let's work to make sure that land really meets the promises that we're looking for the future. So thinking about, how to incentivize good management and help landowners, be the stewards they want to be and also to increase access to land wherever we can as well.
Yep.
I think that was it.
I think that's it.
Slide.
So, yeah, I mean, you were starting to get into it here. I'd love to hear Land Trust's thoughts on PES strategies too, because it comes so much into farming and in other ways like that, part of the Otter Creek that you're sort of taking out of farming, but is there a way to pay people to do that so that they're not pressures either to develop it or keep farming it when it's not the ideal use?
Yeah, I mean, we worked with the Department of Environmental Conservation on a calculator for these overlays, these wetland restoration overlays to pay landowners for those additional restrictions. So that's one place where we're incentivizing and also where we can, partnering with or sending landowners to the CREP program, which is another sort of payment to remove land from agriculture and restore it as buffers. We have been involved a little bit in the carbon programs. We piloted one sort of aggregation project up in the Cold Hollow region. Not something we're probably going to continue, but the goal of that project was to really demonstrate how a group of landowners could pool their land together to be more attractive to the voluntary carbon market. And then the soil health project is another attempt to think about, all right, are there ways to incentivize and measure improvements in soil health that retain more water and help clean the water. So those are the ones we're involved with and always see ourselves as also a conduit of information, trying to partner, the landowners that we work with, who we see annually in the work we do with some of the other opportunities that might not be coming through us, but are out there for them.
Yeah. Do you ever sell land? I mean, not to farmers, but in sort of like the HCB does, I think in the state of Vermont, sometimes those swaps, if there's a really fantastic piece of land you want and you might be able to.
Do we take land out of conservation? Is that?
Yeah.
Your question?
We can't really take land out of conservation because there's a lot of oversight and rules around conservation easements. Some of the lands we own, before we conserve them, we do think carefully about what housing needs might be associated with a farm or with a particular opportunity, and work to reserve land out of conservation at the time of conservation to try to build in opportunities. And we're a lot more mindful of
Yeah.
that these days
Absolutely.
than ever before, in terms of thinking about the responsibility we have to also make sure that other community goals like housing and other meaningful needs are also available. Yeah.
It's definitely more on our radar than it ever has been, obviously, for obvious reasons. You know, like, should we allow some other housing, you know, to go on this property and, yeah. Yep.
Well, that is. That's the evolution of time, you know, maybe. Sometimes if we want village centers to grow, we have to be mindful of these things. And listen to me talk about that, because you know.
Okay.
Well, that's actually a good segue into saying thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate the time. And always available to answer questions, other things come up through the session, just. keep us
And thank you for serving. Thank you for
Yeah,
doing this.
and we'll be back, probably
We're
let's.
doing it for the
be-
pay.
Yeah, exactly.
The retirement